Welcome to Hiraeth, the home of modern Welsh politics. For the first time since 2010, a Labour-run UK government has appointed its Secretary of State for Wales, and picking up the reins from the 7 Conservative appointees in that time is Joe Stevens, the MP for the new constituency of Cardiff East, who joins us today. Hello, Joe. How are you?
Hello, Matt. I'm good, thanks. Nice to be here.
Thank you very much for joining us. It's great to have you on the pod so soon into your tenure as Secretary of State for Wales. I think everyone who's listened to the pod in previous years has wondered why other incumbents of that office may not have been so forthcoming with an interview. But I probably should start by asking you what it feels like to be in this role now, to have the Labour Party be the party of government in Westminster after so many years.
It certainly feels really different. I mean, I'd only ever been an opposition MP, having been elected in 2015, and where are we now? You know, sort of mid-August, not even mid-August. It kind of feels like I've been in the job for about a year already, because the pace at which we have worked cross-government from the 5th of July onwards has been phenomenal. But it's such a good feeling, and it's such a privilege to be able to do this job. And finally, you know, after all those years of opposition, do things which I hope are going to make a positive difference to the people of Wales. That's certainly what my ambition and my intention is.
So you mentioned, obviously, you've done that role in opposition for quite some years. What did you find in your intro when you walked into the job? And has anything surprised you since taking the role?
No, it hasn't surprised me. And I think that's a good thing, because that shows that we did the work when we were in opposition. And as a shadow team, you know, worked very hard to make sure that we understood what was going on in Wales, what people wanted, what they needed, what we would need to do. And that obviously all fed into the manifesto process and the election campaign and our preparation for government work. And so nothing has surprised me. I mean, clearly there are big challenges for us. I suppose the one surprise is the discovery of quite how serious the state the public finances are in. And Rachel Reeves, the new Chancellor, gave her economic statement at the end of July, where she set out how we've found £22 billion of unfunded commitments just in this current fiscal year. And to learn that, you know, the reserves have been spent 3 times over was pretty shocking. And I kind of went from shock to anger to furiousness about how could a government possibly leave the country in this state. You know, you go into government with the aim of, when you leave, making sure the country's in a better position than when you started it. And clearly, I think the reverse happened with the last government. So I've kind of got over my anger now, but now, you know, the hard work has to start, and we've got some really tough decisions to make.
I was going to say, has that discovery changed any of your individual plans running the Wales office now?
No, I mean, my plan was and is to lead an outward-looking Wales office and take that active role in improving people's day-to-day lives right across Wales. I think the way in which the Wales office was operated under the previous administration was very negative. I mean, it was essentially like a trolling factory. Everything that came out of it was negative. It derided Welsh Government at every turn. It talked down Wales. And I'm not clear myself, trying to be as objective as I can, what it ever delivered for people across Wales. And I'm determined, and I think, you know, hopefully people have seen this already in the first 5-6 weeks of the government, that we have set out at pace to deliver on what we promised. So things like economic growth, on the green energy mission, you know, the announcement of GB Energy, the changes to the Crown Estate. We are determined to deliver those promises, because we know we will be judged on delivery. So I'm working with cabinet colleagues across government to make sure that Wales is a very strong voice at the cabinet table and beyond, because, you know, this job involves being Wales's voice in Westminster, but also Wales's voice right across the country and abroad.
So, you know, it's interesting you talk about the way that the Wales office operated in the past. I know during the debates for the election, you often said that David T.C. Davies was sometimes felt like he was a Secretary of State against Wales rather than for Wales. But these, for lack of a better word, the territorial offices are obviously created in a slightly different era when there was no degree of formal devolution to the nations. How do you think that's changing now? And what do you think the Labour Party's vision is for these roles during the era of national parliaments in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland?
Well, first of all, I balk at the term territorial
Yeah,
offices.
I don't like it
it's
either.
awful,
Yeah.
isn't it? Yeah. So, clearly we are different types of offices, departments to other departments in government. And one of the things that means is that you, rather than have a specialist brief in one policy area, you have to lead a team of people who are knowledgeable and experienced across every possible aspect of Welsh life. And that's quite a lot to get your head around. And that's why we worked so hard in opposition to make sure that we did our preparation for government work so thoroughly. But the other aspect of it is, of course, resetting the relationship with Welsh Government. I heard so much during the election campaign from voters across Wales who said they were so fed up of this friction, tense relationship that, they wanted to see the two governments working together. And we are determined, Keir Starmer as Prime Minister is determined, Welsh Government is determined that we reset that relationship. And I think, the Prime Minister made that very apparent when he came to Wales within days of being appointed. And I've worked very closely with Welsh Government ministers, with the First Ministers we've had during that period. And we are absolutely clear that, we want to be able to show the benefits of having two Labour governments, one in Westminster, one in Wales.
So some commentators have said that the dynamic between UK and Welsh Government now will be like the UK-US special relationship. What do you make of that comparison? And I'm very interested to hear your thoughts on how you found the state of intergovernmental relations between UK and Welsh Government when you arrived in the office, and how you think that will now change.
So, if I think about what it was like before the election, we've talked a bit about the kind of negativity, and clearly it was a very, very difficult relationship. And that had happened over that 14 years where things like the Sewell Convention was not being respected, the intergovernmental mechanisms that were in place where, the Prime Minister was supposed to meet with the First Minister, didn't happen. The obvious example was when Tata, made their announcement about the blast furnaces, and Rishi Sunak would not even, answer the phone to the then First Minister Mark Drakeford. And we're very clear and have been, and I've done a big piece of work on this, that we want, as well as resetting the relationship, to make sure that we put those structures in place that mean that intergovernmental relations work properly, on the basis of collaboration and trust and respect. Now, that's not to say that every single time, 100% of the time, we're going to agree on everything. Of course not. But, you have to have that relationship of trust and respect. And I want to work, and so far, this has been what I've been doing, and I've had it reciprocated. I want to work so that we work at an early stage. We might even co-design things together. We want proper engagement so that where we come across those issues where there might be blurred lines about whether or not something's devolved or not, or how we might work cross-border, we're thinking about it early on. We're making sure that we've covered off all the gaps, and that we've got a shared objective to deliver. And that objective has to be to make people's lives in Wales better.
So one of the things that fascinates me about the time that Labour were last in control at both ends of the M4 was that some people said that the mechanisms between UK and Welsh governments tended to be more party focused rather than clear lines between governments. Do you envisage that changing and it being a more formal intergovernmental process rather than negotiations happening between party colleagues?
I certainly think that everything that I've heard and discussed around this has been about having those proper professional structures, Council of Nations and Regions, for example, the reform of the House of Lords so that we've got proper representation in terms of the whole of the United Kingdom. This is about, and Keir talked about it in his speech outside number 10 when he was appointed, this is going to be, we are going to be a government of service. And if you're going to be a government of service, then you have to operate properly, professionally, with integrity and responsibility. And that means operating those structures properly as well. And I do not expect that anybody will want to depart from that.
Now, it has been a difficult couple of months for Labour at the Senedd level with everything that's been going on. But I'm intrigued to see what kind of level of discussion you've already had with Eluned and how you feel like the relationship is going to work there moving forward.
Well, it's quite funny, isn't it? Eluned and I are exactly the same age. I mean, she's a hugely experienced politician. I came to politics late in my adult life. But Eluned has got 30 years as an elected representative in the European Parliament. She was then obviously in the House of Lords. That wasn't elected, but she was a front bencher for the Shadow Wales team in the House of Lords, and also then in the Senedd. And she's a pragmatic politician. She's a problem solver. She wants to get things done. And it's almost like looking in a mirror sometimes. We're very similar. And we have worked very closely together. We've known each other a long time. Since she has become First Minister, we have had very regular discussions, as I did with her predecessor, Vaughan Gething. And I've also met regularly with different Welsh Government ministers, as have my counterparts in the Cabinet. So I think, we've started as we mean to go on. And I think it will be a close working relationship, and it will be an honest, pragmatic, trusted relationship, and I'm really looking forward to it.
So it's interesting to hear what you're saying about working sort of in partnership for the aim of delivery and potentially working together on policy implementation. Is there any early signs of areas where that may be happening, or is this sort of something that will develop over time as both the new cabinet embed themselves in both Wales and in Westminster?
Yeah, I mean, it's very early days, isn't it? We've only been in government for just over 6 weeks, I think, or maybe 6 weeks. And the First Minister has only been in government a week and a day, I think. Yeah. So, but there are obvious areas, if you think about it, where cross-border initiatives, could happen. Things like transport, things like health. There are things in Wales that we do really well, and we want to I'm really keen that we share that best practice with colleagues in other parts of the United Kingdom and vice versa, because ultimately this is about making people's lives better. And so I think being flexible and pragmatic about where you can provide support and receive support is a good way to work.
So one of the areas that I'm sure the people of Wales really want to see good coordinated working between Welsh and UK governments is relating to steelmaking at Tata in Port Talbot. Obviously, we're speaking to you the day before you make a big announcement on the industry there. This has obviously been a major concern for both governments and for people in the local area. What are you announcing, and what is the government's vision for the future of the site at Port Talbot?
Yeah, so I'm announcing £13.5 million from the UK government to support businesses and workers in Port Talbot. These funds are going out of the door immediately to address the emergency caused by the uncertainty around Port Talbot's future. This is about protecting existing jobs in the supply chain businesses and supporting any workers affected, so that they're in the best possible position to take up a new job if they need to do that. So that £13.5 million, which is the first tranche of UK Government Transition Board money, will go to two funds: business supply chain. So that will help local businesses where Tata is their main customer, to support them in diversifying their business where that's needed. So to look at new markets, for example, maybe new products. And the second element will be this employment support fund, and that's going to help individual workers, primarily people who are not direct employees of Tata, because we have other funds and plans in relation to that. But this is for people in the supply chain, because we already know that there are some people in the supply chain who have lost their jobs. So that's going to help them in the supply chain, contractors as well at Tata, to find new jobs, learn new skills, gain qualifications in areas where there are vacancies. And that means that we have that safety net in place immediately, because our government, our Labour government, is determined that we will back workers and businesses whatever happens. And this is the first tranche of money to be released through the Transition Board. It was set up 10 months ago under the Conservative government. I chaired my first Transition Board meeting the week I was appointed, and I was very clear that after, by then it was 9 months, we were going to move from discussion to delivery. And I made a promise that I would come back and start on that delivery. And in that second transition board meeting where I'm announcing the funding, we are clear that, there's that delivery, there's the money going out of the door. And in addition, we're also launching what is called the Port Talbot Business and Community Support Pledge. And this is 50 local businesses who have pledged to provide practical support for any workers who might find themselves out of work. And this is things like guaranteed interviews, help with the costs of getting to interviews, financial advice for people, training and support. So it is effectively a community demonstration of how government, business, unions, and the local community working together can help stabilise a local economy when it goes through a shock like Port Talbot is going through and will go through. And included in that, obviously, is Welsh Government and the local council as well, who will deliver the projects that we will use with that £13.5 million.
So I asked you earlier about whether anything has surprised you, but I'm intrigued to see how you feel the negotiation. Obviously, you don't have to disclose anything, but how you found the process of negotiation with Tata and with the local community about what they expect in terms of government support or action from government. Have you been taken aback by anything?
I've been talking with workers and unions and with Tata for a long time prior to the election. And obviously, immediately after the election, the Prime Minister spoke to Tata's global leadership within, I think it was the same day that he was appointed. And then the following day, the Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, and I also spoke with the global leadership from Tata. And we have continued to engage with them and with the UK Tata management at Port Talbot on a regular basis. And my attitude to this is that it's going to take a collective effort to deliver a collective solution here. Our primary focus, our priority is to make sure that, we protect as many jobs as possible. That has to be our primary objective. But we also want to make sure, because we are going to need more steel, not less, to build that infrastructure that we've promised and talked about and to deliver our 2030 mission for clean electricity. I want that steel to be made in Wales. There's huge potential in Port Talbot and across South Wales. If you take the Celtic Freeport, if you take the steelworks, the development of Port Talbot Port, for example, and floating offshore wind, there is a once-in-a-generation opportunity for us not just to protect steelworking jobs and increase the amount of steel that we make, but to increase the jobs, good skilled jobs, create that renewable energy that's going to bring down bills and secure energy independence for the UK in the future. So, I want Wales to play its part in that. I think we've got huge opportunities, and I will do everything I possibly can to make sure that Wales's place in that story is right at the front.
So I think one of the questions that people really do want to get to the bottom of is what is the future of primary steelmaking in Wales? Do you think it does have a future here?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's got to have a future. I mean, steel is a strategically important industry for the United Kingdom. And this is what was so frustrating in opposition. We could see over years and years and years, the last government delaying decisions that would have helped protect the steel industry, help grow it, decisions that could have been made on things like energy intensive industries, on competition, those sorts of things where they wouldn't make the decisions. And they just sat back essentially and let this crisis unfold. And we have decided that, we are not going to do that, not on our watch. We are determined to make sure that we put the measures in place to protect as many jobs as possible, but to ensure that that transition from how steel is made at the moment to cleaner steel delivers those opportunities. And we don't have that cliff edge of going, from thousands and thousands of people employed to nobody employed. We've got to smooth that transition. It's in everybody's interest. We want cleaner steel. We want renewable energy. we want to protect the climate and we want good jobs and economic growth in the future. And I can't see any reason why we can't have that, with Wales playing a massively critical part.
I mean, some people have suggested that the UK government should nationalise Tata. I know you're not a big fan of that, but would you be able to explain a little bit about why that's the case?
Well, you would only ever look at doing that as an absolute last resort, and we are not in that situation. And I just don't think it would be a good use of public money to do that. We've got to work. We've got developers and businesses across Wales and across the United Kingdom and from overseas who are desperate to invest in the United Kingdom, desperate to invest in Wales, and by drawing in. So, for example, the GB Energy and Crown Estate announcements that we made last month, some of the first legislation that we've put before the Commons since we won the election, that is designed so that we can leverage in up to £60 billion of private investment. And, I would want to see a big part of that money coming to Wales. That would be used to develop on GB Energy's work on offshore wind. Why shouldn't we be at the forefront of this? Why let other countries take the lead? I want us to be in the lead. I want us to win the race. And that's why I think that's the right approach, rather than taking, looking back and the kind of nationalisation argument. I don't think is an argument or a policy that's fit for where we are now.
It is interesting you talk about the need for steel in terms of our renewable ambitions, and that is an area where I think there is going to have to be a degree of co-working between Welsh and UK governments, because, again, it's one of those weird jagged-edged areas where it's a little bit devolved and a little bit reserved. So what kind of role will you play in driving that forward, and what kind of role will the Welsh Government play?
Well, so we have already in Wales Ynni Cymru, publicly owned, and GB Energy will work closely with Ynni Cymru. The relationship with the Crown Estate is important, obviously, because I've talked about that £60 billion worth of investment. And this is about partnership working again, that thing about, business, government and workers and unions working together in equal partnership in order to drive forward that economic growth. And I think we've got huge opportunities. I want to see those opportunities happen. I mean, I don't think we've had an opportunity like this for decades. Certainly, not since I left school and university. And so I'm really excited about it. I am ambitious about it. And I'm also really keen, and this is what's been happening so far, working cross-government in UK government with Treasury, with the Business Department, with the Office of the Deputy Prime Minister and MHCLG. You remember the names changing, but also with Welsh Government. This is about bringing the collective together in order to deliver something that's bigger. And we want to do that at pace so that we can reach that 2030 target.
Yeah, it's interesting. So one of the areas that I wanted to talk to you about is sort of in keeping with that, is relating to structural funds. Now, for me, it makes sense, but I think there was a lot of confusion during the election campaign that people thought that, that Labour had gone back on its promise to devolve that back to the Welsh Government. But from my understanding, that's not how it's going to work. The UK government will be essentially a sort of acting in the way that the EU operated previously, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of mischief making around this during the election campaign. Essentially, we are returning to what happened previously before the Conservative government made their changes. So the decisions about investment and management of those funds and the replacement funds and how they're spent, is with Welsh Government, and local authorities have been playing a big part in this as well. But the oversight and the reporting in terms of evaluation of that to make sure that we're spending it effectively has always been with UK government, and that will still be with UK government. But we're essentially putting the piece of the jigsaw back in how it was before. And it's about money being spent in Wales, those decisions being made in Wales, and quite rightly.
I mean, the one aspect that people in local government really liked during the previous system was the amount of say they got. And I think the general consensus was that all three layers of government needed to be involved in some way, shape, or form. Would you still like to see a future where there is that sort of local delivery element through local government scheme?
I certainly think that we've seen some benefits from it. I didn't like the way in which it was set up structurally, particularly, it was done deliberately to kind of cut out Welsh Government completely. Devolution doesn't just mean devolution to Welsh Government, it means further devolution as well. And, I hope and I believe that we can work all together, so UK Government, Welsh Government, local authorities in Wales, because we've all got the same ambition, to improve the lives of people across Wales. And I think by working together, we can do that. There are big decisions to be made. We've got a very difficult economic situation. It's very, very challenging. And so the only way that we are going to be able to deliver those improvements is if we all work together. If we're working in silos, that's not going to happen.
So another area of potential mischief making during the general election campaign was people making a lot of the potential disagreements between Welsh Labour policy positions and the UK Labour manifesto in relation to the devolution settlement. Where do you think we are in the party in terms of the sentiment towards what should and shouldn't be devolved? Do you think that debate is largely settled, or do you think that the old adage that devolution is a process, not an event, do you think that that's going to continue to progress as time moves on?
Well, you took the words right out of my mouth. Meatloaf famously sang. So it is. It's not an event. It's a process, and my approach to this is what delivers the best outcome. Because if you listen to what people said in the election, it was a very clear message from people right across Wales in terms of what their priorities are. They want to see the economy recover. They want jobs created. They want decent wages. They want good public services. They want to feel safe in their streets and in their towns and city centres. And all of those cover areas that are reserved and devolved, but also all of them can be subject to joint working to make those improvements. And actually, our Welsh Labour manifesto, the 6 pledges or the 6 steps that we outlined in that, aligned exactly with what the UK Labour manifesto said, and that gives you the platform. And we had an overwhelming mandate in Wales. 27 out of 32 MPs returned were Labour MPs. We have that mandate from the people across Wales to deliver that. So, obviously devolution is part of that story, but in terms of what the initial priorities are, those are what was set out in the manifesto. But included in that were, things like enhancing protection for devolution so that we wouldn't see what happened previously about riding roughshod over the devolution settlement, so protection on the Sewell Convention. We've said that we'll explore options for more locally delivered services that meet the Welsh public's needs. So we'll explore devolution of powers around youth justice and probation services. We're going to strengthen that intergovernmental working, which I've talked about already. And very importantly, I think, is providing better access to economic resources, because ultimately that's what makes the difference. Restoring that decision-making role for Welsh Government on structural funds that we've talked about. But also, I was very clear and very keen that we should look at the fiscal framework because it is out of date. And so that's a piece of work that we will do jointly with Welsh Government.
You're reading my mind in terms of questions, Jo. But one area which has been devolved to Scotland and could theoretically provide a bit of an economic impetus to the Welsh Government finances is theoretically relating to the devolution of the Crown Estate. I know you've talked a little bit about the investment previously, but what do you think are the reasons why you wouldn't look to devolve that at the moment?
Well, I don't think it would deliver the sort of benefits that one of the parties in Wales talks about, because obviously there's an offset against the block grant. So I would say just be careful what you wish for if you're looking for this. But the Crown Estate works closely with the Welsh Government as it is to manage the land and the seabed to bring benefits to Wales. And as I said, one of the first pieces of legislation that we introduced immediately after the election was to set up publicly owned GB Energy and that partnership between GB Energy and the Crown Estate. Now, that's £60 billion of private investment that we hope to leverage into the UK and lots of it in Wales. That's not going to happen. If we start devolving the Crown Estate, what's going to happen? We're going to have a massive delay. We're going to have barriers in place of that. No developer or business, and I've talked to many, many of them around floating offshore wind, none of them have said to me, do you know what we really need to do? We need to devolve the Crown Estate. They want the delays to stop. We saw enough delay under last government, with a terrible round when nobody bid in because the strike price was in the wrong place. We've got to move at pace now so that we can get that floating offshore wind built. We can bring down bills, we can create those jobs, and we can secure energy independence for the United Kingdom. So we're not in that situation when we were when Putin invaded Ukraine. And if we were looking at devolving the Crown Estate, that would place a barrier and delay right there, and it would put the kibosh on a lot of that we want to achieve.
Obviously, we've seen some horrific incidents of public disorder in the UK in the last few weeks. I mean, there is a discussion, there has been a long-term discussion about the devolution of justice to Wales. What kind of impact do you think that has in terms of potentially, cross-border working and things like that? Do you think that there is some concern about the devolution of justice powers if there would be some blockage to cross-border working, etc.?
Well, I don't hear it. I mean, not a single person has ever said to me on a doorstep in Wales that this is their priority. I accept that for some people, it is something they want to see. And I've got colleagues in Welsh Labour who would like to see it. But I mean, one of our key missions is safer streets. And we have made specific promises around the recruitment of more neighbourhood officers. So, 13,000 more neighbourhood officers, because we know that when you see officers in your locality, it reduces crime because people know that there are police or PCSOs around and they don't commit as many crimes. We are going to tackle antisocial behaviour, and this week I was out with local councillors in Cardiff in the city centre with the city centre wardens, talking to them about this multidisciplinary approach that they have with the police, with the wardens, with the council and other agencies to deal with instances of antisocial behaviour in the city centre, which does impact on how people feel, whether they feel safe, whether they feel like they want to come into the city centre to spend their money. So getting antisocial behaviour down through respect orders and changes to the public spaces protection orders as well, which we will do, and which is, when I talked to the people involved yesterday, they were very, very, very keen to see this happen. And also a big commitment, and we've led the way in Wales on this, I'm really proud about this, but halving serious violence against women and girls. Today, there are figures out from the rail industry about a 50% increase in abuse and violence towards women and girls on our public transport, on the trains. This is wrong, and this has to change. And so that's why we've placed that key strategy and mission at the heart of our manifesto. And I'm working cross-department with colleagues in the Home Office, in the Ministry of Justice and elsewhere to make sure that we can deliver that, and using what we've learned in Wales and what we've done in Wales to help develop that policy.
Would you say it's fair to say then, Jo, that your focus for the first period of government anyway is primarily on delivery and sorting out the mess of previous governments, rather than necessarily thinking about the constitutional background of everything?
Yes. I mean, clearly, we've got incredibly economically challenged times. It is worse than we thought we would inherit. We knew it was going to be bad, and it is much worse. And the way in which we can then start to make those improvements and start to think about those other things, if we can get some economic stability, get the economy growing, in order to do that, we've got to get the economy stabilised. We've got to grow the economy. We've got to create those jobs so that people have more money in their pockets. And that then is about, making people's lives better. So you see improvements in health, building the homes that we need for the future, improving public transport, all of those things. It's one of the things that really frustrated me watching government from opposition was looking at this kind of silo approach to government. And I used to run a business before I went into Parliament, and you can kind of see what needs to happen. I mean, it's on a hugely much bigger scale, but it's about joining up that work so that that if you do something here, it's going to have positive consequences here, here, and here.
So you've talked about the state of the economy, and obviously it's pretty bleak. Mm-hmm. And you've also mentioned, potentially looking at the way the Welsh Government's funded in the future. I mean, there is a large debate and it has been going on for many years about the Barnett formula. Is it through that kind of mechanism you potentially looked at reframing the financial discussion, or is it other ways you're kind of investigating that at the moment?
It's other ways. So, what Welsh Government say to me is that they would like and they need more certainty and more notice about what money is coming through and when it's coming through, because what they want to do, and I fully back them in this, obviously, is to make sure that their budget is spent in the most effective way possible. And we have this thing at the moment where they find out very close, in fact, sometimes on the same day, to an announcement, a big fiscal event, what the impact is for Wales. Sometimes they don't find out about it for weeks or months afterwards, and that makes it very difficult to plan. So it's about having that flexibility, and we will have very early discussions on that, I hope. And this is about making sure that there's an improved context for them to work in. But obviously some of the things that we put in our manifesto and we were elected on, about changes to tax loopholes, changes to VAT, so it will be charged on private school fees. Those will deliver an immediate cash injection through the Barnett formula to Wales and to Welsh Government, so that they can then start to make those investments into public services to do the things like bringing down long waiting lists.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because actually a lot of people in Welsh Government circles will often say that they only get their funding on a one-year basis, where local authorities even get multi-year financial statements. And in many ways, local authorities tend to have better borrowing powers, etc., than Welsh Government. So is it, not trying to force you into a corner or read between the lines, Joe, but do you think that multi-year financial settlement is something that UK Government may consider in the future to provide a bit more certainty to Welsh Government?
So the Chancellor has talked about the two big fiscal events we're going to have on the 30th of October. So we're going to have a budget and a spending review. And certainly the intention is to give that certainty so that it goes beyond just 1 year settlements. So, there's a lot of work now in the lead up to the spending review. I'll be playing my part in that, and the Wales Office team. And Welsh Government obviously will feed into that as well. So, this is about how much money is there, how do we spend it in the most effective way, and how do we make sure that we deliver on those missions to, stabilise and then grow the economy.
Joe, thank you so much for your time. It would be very remiss of me, though, with my last question, to not talk about our mutual home of Cardiff. So you've been the MP in Cardiff East for 9 years, Cardiff Central before that, for 9 years. How has it changed in that time, and how you're in government? Does it give you a different perspective on the city?
Well, Cardiff has grown. It's grown massively. I mean, I've lived in the city for 35 years, and it's unrecognisable from what it was when I first came here after I finished university. And it's grown in a wonderful way. I think we've got fantastic people, we've got brilliant businesses, we've got amazing universities with people doing wonderful things in them. And that's why I'm really ambitious, not just about my city, but about Wales as well. I think we can really punch above our weight. I mean, just look at the Olympics. Welsh athletes have just had the best ever medal haul at the Olympics. I'm really proud of that. I'm proud of our culture. I'm proud of our sporting prowess. I'm proud that people want to come to Wales and enjoy themselves when they're here. And I want more people to do that. So there's changes, and there are positive changes. And actually, I think the fact that we are an inclusive, welcoming, diverse city, and the fact that we haven't had any of the violent disorder that we've seen in other parts of the United Kingdom, we haven't had it in Wales and we haven't had it in Cardiff. I feel very grateful and reassured and proud that that's been the case. And long may it continue.
From one proud Cardiffian to another, Jo Stevens, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Hiraeth. If you like what you heard, please don't forget to subscribe, rate and review.